Let's start the second session now. And in the second session, we'll be looking at the mindfulness of breathing practice, the full body version. We'll begin the session with another meditation of emphasizing the preparation part of the meditation, that is settling body, speech, and mind. After that, we'll do a short review of some of the main points from the last session. And then the main topic in this session is what objects should we use for this practice? Because in this practice of Shamatha, we're cultivating single-pointed concentration. So what object should we focus on? So we'll look at some possibilities there. Then we'll do a meditation, the mindfulness of breathing practice, the full body variation of this practice, very conducive for cultivating relaxation. And then time for some question answer at the end of the session. In terms of preparing body, speech, and mind, this is something we do at the beginning of every meditation session, not just Shamatha practice. We saw there that in terms of preparing the body, it's really to set the body into this state of relaxation, stillness, and vigilance. Vigilant posture is to keep the back nice and straight. So the two main points with posture is back straight, body relaxed. And having established a good posture, keeping the body as still as possible. Preparing the speech, the first part of that is if you come into the meditation with a lot of agitation, a lot of maybe negativity in the mind, it's very hard to move from that negative state to a positive state. And so therefore, what can be helpful is to do a breathing exercise here in preparing the speech. What we did in the last session was to take 3 deep breaths. Other options in other traditions, sometimes they talk about counting 21 breaths. And in Tibetan Buddhist tradition, the 9-round breathing exercise. And so we can make this an optional part of this meditation. So if you find that that was helpful, you can do it. Otherwise, you can leave it out. And then in terms of preparing speech was mental speech. And to help settle that, if we simply allow the breathing to settle into its natural rhythm, by allowing the breathing to settle, that is connected closely with the mind. And so by allowing the breath to settle, the mind starts to settle. But settling the breath doesn't mean we're trying to regulate the breath. We're not trying to make the breathing rhythmic or shallow or deep or anything. Just let the breathing settle naturally. And then in terms of preparing the mind, setting the mind into this state of relaxation, stillness, and clarity. So stillness here is simply to bring the mind into the present moment and just rest in that present moment. And what we notice is that the present moment is still. Now, we're not trying to make the mind still, meaning we're not trying to sort of somehow suppress thoughts or try and block thoughts. There can still be thoughts going on, but we're not paying attention to them. We're just resting in that present moment of stillness. Now, you may find that that's quite difficult to do if there's lots of things going on in the mind. What we'll do here then is to help keep the mind into the present moment. We'll anchor ourselves in the breath, because the breath, sensations of breath only happen in the present moment. So that can be helpful to bring the mind into the present moment. Let's do that practice. Find a nice, comfortable posture, and let's begin. We begin, as always, by preparing the body, setting the body into a state of relaxation, stillness, and vigilance. using the out breath to relax and release any tightness or tension in any part of the body. And relaxing more deeply with each out breath. And if you find it helpful, you can take 3 slow, deep breaths, maintaining awareness of sensations throughout the body as you breathe. Allowing the breathing to settle into its natural rhythm, not trying to control or regulate the breath in any way, simply allowing it to flow naturally and effortlessly. And with each out breath, letting go of any thoughts that may have arisen, happily releasing them. And simply allowing the mind to come to rest, in the present moment, resting in that stillness. And we can use the breath to help us anchor in the present moment. So from that stillness, start to become aware of the sensations of the breath throughout the body. noticing any sensations associated with the in and out flow of the breath. And maintaining an ongoing flow of mindfulness of the sensations of the breath throughout the entire cycle of each in and out breath. If you get distracted from the breath, remember the first thing to do is simply relax. Then release the distraction and very gently return to focusing on the breath. So relax, release, and return each time you notice you've become distracted. we can bring the meditation to a close. Let's start with a short review of some of the earlier points before we go on to the topic for this session. So we're looking at the Shamatha practice. Shamatha is a Sanskrit term we can divide into two parts. Shama means calm, a mind that is calm, non-discursive. Ta means to remain or abide. And so therefore, shamatha is a mind that is not only calm, but abiding, i.e. focused single-pointedly on an object. So shamatha is the practice of cultivating this calm, clear, and focused mind. It's a concentration practice. And so here in the Mahayana Buddhist traditions, often when they talk about doing concentration practice, they simply say we're doing shamatha practice. Whereas in the Theravada Buddhist traditions, when they're doing concentration practice, they often say we're doing jhana practice. Jhana is simply another level of concentration, so it's the same practice. Why is this shamatha practice important? In terms of everyday life, it's all about improving our attention skills. If we do that, we'll be more effective in everything we do, much better mental balance. We really will become the masters of our mind, and often translates into some physical health benefits as well. But here at a deeper level, the shamatha practice is integral to the pursuit of genuine happiness. That all Buddhist traditions, the practices can be condensed down to these three core areas of practice of ethics, concentration, and wisdom. And so if we want to find genuine happiness, well-being, we need to engage in the wisdom of vipassana practice. But to effectively do that, we need shamatha as the basis. And so here we have this quote from Attention Revolution, the recommended reading from Alan Wallace, he says, mental balance is the gateway to finding genuine happiness, and shamatha is the key that opens that gate. So it's very important to engage in the shamatha practice in the pursuit of genuine happiness or inner well-being. And we saw again that in the Theravada Buddhist traditions, the Noble Eightfold Path can be condensed to these three core areas of practice. And also in the Mahayana Buddhist traditions, where they talk about the 6 perfections practices, these can also be condensed to the same three core areas of practice: ethics, concentration, wisdom. And particularly in the Mahayana Buddhist traditions, then when we talk about the wisdom practice or vipassana practice, we're really talking about this wisdom of emptiness, coming to realize there is no independent me, no independent objective world, that everything's empty of independent existence. If we can come to this direct insight into emptiness, we can overcome mental afflictions, suffering, and find that genuine happiness and inner well-being. But to be able to come to a direct insight into emptiness, we need a very stable, clear, focused mind. We need the mind of shamatha. And so if we want to cut the root of suffering, then we need this union of shamatha and vipassana, observing emptiness. So shamatha is key in the pursuit of genuine happiness. In terms of shamatha training, there are a number of points we're looking at in this weekend program. Prerequisites for shamatha, how to set up our life to support this practice. We'll look at in the last session tomorrow, session 6. In terms of the actual practice, in terms of preparation for meditation, preparing body, speech, and mind, we looked at that in the first session. In terms of the actual meditation, we already looked briefly at what qualities to cultivate in this practice. In this session, we're going to look at what object should we focus on to do this shamatha practice. In the next session, we'll be looking at what tools do we use in this practice and what sorts of faults can arise and how do we overcome them. And also how to integrate this practice into daily life, we'll also look at in the last session tomorrow, session 6. And in terms of the stages of progress we go through in this practice, we'll be using that colored diagram, one of the handouts, looking at that 9-stage model, and we'll be looking at that in some detail in the first 2 sessions tomorrow. That is in session 4 and 5 for this weekend. Again, with preparing body, speech, and mind, it's very important that we do this well at the beginning of every meditation session. Now, often people, when they sit down to meditate, either leave this out or don't do it well, and then they wonder why the actual meditation is not going so well. So it's important to prepare body, speech, and mind well at the beginning of each session. Sometimes it's quite quick. We can do it quite quickly. Other times, maybe we've got a lot of agitation in the body and agitation in the mind. It may take longer to prepare body, speech, and mind, but that's time well spent. So don't cut preparation short. If we really prepare the mind, body, and speech well at the beginning of a meditation session, then we have a much more effective basis for the actual meditation, and there's more likely that we'll make some progress in the actual meditation session. And we saw in the first session, the earlier session, that the qualities we cultivate in this practice, in the original Shamatha meditation texts, two qualities are really emphasized or mentioned: stability and clarity. To cultivate a mind that is stable, i.e., one that can focus single-pointedly on the object without getting distracted. But also we want to focus on that object in a very clear way to overcome dullness or laxity. But here we added a third quality, the quality of relaxation, that often is not very much emphasized in the early meditation texts. And I think the reason is that, 500 or 1,000 years ago, in those cultures, people tended to be quite relaxed. So it didn't really need to be emphasized. In fact, often in the beginning of the Shamatha practice, one of the first instructions you'll often see in these original texts is something like, firmly tighten your focus on the object. And when we read that, we go, yep, I can do that. And we clamp down hard on the object, because that's what it says, isn't it? And that's what we do in our modern world. When we want to focus on something, we tend to put a lot of tension in our focus. And this is not sustainable. I know from personal experience and talking to many people that if we really want to be able to cultivate any sort of sustainable stability and clarity, that must come through the basis of relaxation. The more relaxed our body and mind is, the more effective and stable we can cultivate stability and clarity of attention. And we saw that analogy of the tree, that we really need to sink the first deep roots of relaxation to be able to support the strong trunk of stability, therefore be able to support the branches and leaves of clarity. And I can't overemphasize this point enough, this importance of relaxation. And to really emphasize this relaxation, I'd like to read a little bit from, again, the recommended reading from Alan Wallace here, Attention Revolution. On page 14, he says the following. He says, thus, our practice of mindfulness of breathing consists of prolonging our awareness of our breath. While this requires an alert mind, such concentration should not be tense, but rather balanced. When we discover that we've become distracted from the meditation object, it may feel natural to clamp down more forcefully, tightly concentrating the mind. You can see this in the facial expressions of people who try to concentrate in this way. Their lips become pursed, their eyebrows draw together, and their foreheads become furled with wrinkles. They're becoming concentrated, but like orange juice, most of the fluidity is being drained from their minds. If you want to concentrate for a short while and don't mind the side effects of tension and fatigue, you can follow the above strategy. But if you want to follow the path of shamatha, you'll need an alternative. I had to discover this fact through experience. During my first extended shamatha retreat, I was filled with enthusiasm. I wanted to take full advantage of the rare opportunity that was before me, for I was meditating in India under the guidance of the Dalai Lama. I had no financial worries and my material needs were easily met. All I had to do was put the instructions into practice. I threw myself into this training with all my might. Each morning, I would rise at 3:30, except once I slept in until 3:45 and got upset with myself for slacking off. Enthusiastic I was, but so uptight. The Tibetan manuals on shamatha meditation that I had studied over the years stated that the type of attention needed when one began such practice was, quote, highly focused. So I tried as hard as I could to keep my mind from wandering. Within a matter of a few weeks, devoting many hours each day to meditation, I could sustain my attention on my chosen object for up to half an hour. I was elated by making such fast progress. As the weeks went by, however, I found myself becoming more and more fatigued. I was draining myself both physically and mentally. My joy in the practice was diminishing accordingly, and I felt my attention was not developing any further. What was wrong? I was trying too hard. The cultivation of shamatha involves balancing the mind, and that includes balancing the effort exerted in the practice with relaxation. I think this points to a cultural difference between traditional Tibetans living in the highlands of Tibet and modern people leading fast-paced lives. Their senses constantly bombarded by telephones, email, the media, and noise. Years of such existence condition the nervous system and mind in ways that might have been considered torture in rural Tibet. One traditional Tibetan doctor whom I know once commented on people living in the West. So now he's quoting the Tibetan doctor who says, from the perspective of Tibetan medicine, you are all suffering from nervous disorders. But given how ill you are coping remarkably well. Now back to Alan Wallace. He says, whether we dwell in Boston, Buenos Aires, Berlin, or Beijing, our minds are conditioned to be more high-strung and engaged in compulsive thinking than the minds of Tibetan nomads and farmers living a century ago. So when Tibetan meditation manuals advise beginners to focus their attention firmly, the instructions are aimed at a very different reader from the average city dweller in the 21st century. Before we can develop attentional stability, we first need to learn to relax. So again, I can't overemphasize this point enough. Relax, relax, relax. This is really the basis for developing effective stability and clarity of attention. Let's now look at objects. What object should we focus on in this shamatha practice? And here, again, I'll quote from Attention Revolution from Alan Wallace. And he says, to guide meditators along these 10 stages, and the 10 stages are the 9 stages plus the goal of shamatha that we can sort of briefly see here in this colored diagram at the bottom of the slide, which will look at these 9 stages and the goal of shamatha tomorrow in the first 2 sessions. He says, I have chosen from Buddhist teachings 3 techniques that I have found effective for people in the modern world. For achieving the first 4 stages, I recommend mindfulness of breathing. Beginning with the 5th stage, I recommend a method called settling the mind in its natural state. That's what he calls using the mind as the object for shamatha. In other words, to observe our thoughts as the object for shamatha. Then he says, with the instructions for the 8th attentional stage onward, we move on to the still subtler practice of maintaining awareness of awareness itself. The technique is called shamatha without an object. And so that's what I'm calling simply awareness or resting in awareness. With the breath practice, we are aware of the sensations of the breath. With the mind practice, we are aware of our thoughts. In the awareness practice, we're turning awareness in upon itself and simply knowing that we're aware, resting in that experience of awareness. Let's have a look at each of those 3 objects and the advantages with each one. First, we have a quote from Sangha, great Indian master from the 4th century, who says, if involuntary thoughts particularly dominate your behavior, then focus the mind in mindfulness of the exhalation and inhalation of the breath. I think this accounts for about 95% of the modern day population. We're often dominated by our thoughts. We're caught up in a lot of obsessive compulsive thinking. So for many of us in the modern world, the breath is the best object to use, at least initially in this shamatha practice. What are some of the advantages of using the breath? Is that by focusing on the breath, it helps really to get us out of our obsessive compulsive thinking mind into the body. And a lot of our obsessive compulsive thinking is we are living in the past and the future, and the sensations of breath only happen in the present moment. So by focusing on them, it gets us out of the past and the future into the present moment. And the breath is something that's readily available. It's always there. And compared to some other objects like focusing on the mind, it's a little bit easier to focus on because it's a physical, tangible object. There are a number of variations of the breath practice that we're looking at in this weekend retreat. In this session and in the next session, we'll be looking at the full body breath practice, which is very good for emphasizing relaxation. And then tomorrow morning in the first session, or session 4 for the weekend, we will look at focusing on the area of the abdomen, very good for improving stability of attention. And then in session 5, the second session tomorrow, we'll be looking at the practice of focusing at entrance to the nostrils, very good for improving clarity of attention. And what are the benefits with using the breath as the object? Here we have a quote from the Buddha who says, "Just as in the last month of the hot season, when a mass of dust and dirt has swirled up, a great rain cloud out of season disperses it and quells it on the spot, so too concentration by mindfulness of breathing, when developed and cultivated, is peaceful, sublime, and ambrosial dwelling, and it disperses and quells on the spot unwholesome states whenever they arise." So this here quote really describes very well the stages of benefit that we receive from this mindfulness of breathing practice. That when we first start this mindfulness of breathing practice and we start to get into the practice, what we notice is that our mind starts to calm down because we're now focused more on the breath. So we find we have a sense of peace and calm. That's what peaceful means here in the quote. And then if we continue the practice and go further and deeper into mindfulness of breathing, not only will our mind be calm and peaceful, but we're going to have this sense of well-being, both physical and mental well-being. And if we keep doing this practice and go further and deeper into this practice, we're also going to have a lot of blissful sensations in the body, a lot of blissful, joyful state of mind as well. And then due to that practice, then what we'll notice is that in daily life, outside of meditation practice, then mental afflictions such as craving, attachment, jealousy, anger, anxiety, and so forth, you'll find that then they won't be as strong. And if they come up, they'll be a little bit weaker and they'll disperse more quickly. That's what it means here, quells unwholesome states. That you'll find that this practice really has a very much positive effect on all those mental afflictions that often torment us in daily life. They'll be less heavy and last less time. But let's briefly look at other objects that we can use in this practice. So we're using mindfulness of breathing in this weekend because very much recommended for many of us, particularly at the beginning stage of this practice. But also the second object that Alan Wallace was recommending was observing the mind, in other words, observing thoughts. And here, to describe this practice and the advantages of this practice, we have a quote from a great 19th century Tibetan master, Dujung Lingpa, who says, "Some cannot calm their thoughts because the mind is so agitated. Such people should relax and let thoughts be as they are, continually observing them with mindfulness and introspection. By just letting thoughts be, without having to do anything with them, all appearances lose their capacity to harm." Now, many of you who've tried to do this shamatha practice probably had the experience that it's much more challenging than focusing on the breath. And the main two reasons. One is the mind is a more subtle object than the breath. The breath is physical, tangible. The mind is not. And also that we don't tend to have a habit of observing our thoughts. And here when we say thoughts, we don't just mean thinking. It actually, the word thought here means conceptual activity. So observing thoughts not only includes thinking, observing our thoughts in terms of thinking, but also our emotions, our memories, mental images, all conceptual activity. Now, many people find this very challenging as a shamatha practice because we don't have a habit of observing our thoughts and emotions and memories. Our strong habit is if one comes up, we grab hold of it, off we go on our stories. We get caught up in them. Or if they're unpleasant and we don't know what to do with them, we try to suppress them. So that is our strong habit. And because of that, we are often tormented and overwhelmed by our thoughts, emotions, and memories. And we really have become the slaves of our own mind. If we do this practice and develop the ability to watch our thoughts, emotions, and memories, we will become the masters of our own mind instead of being the slaves of our own mind. Because as the quote says here, that they'll lose these appearances will lose their capacity to harm us. Because actually, from their own side, thoughts, emotions, memories have no power to harm us whatsoever. They only have power to harm us if we give them power. And we give them power either by identifying and following them or trying to suppress them. Then they have a lot of power to harm us. But if we simply step back and watch them, they have no power to harm us. And every time we can watch them, we're not feeding the habit of them coming up. So over time, you'll find your mind will become more and more quiet and still. And we really will become the masters of our own mind. And now a lot of the unpleasant thoughts, emotions, and memories we have, we don't know what to do with them. We try to suppress them. And by suppressing them, all we do is they often manifest as physical problems in the body, and we project a lot of this negativity onto others. In this practice, we're not suppressing. We're simply allowing them to arise, acknowledging them, and then they start to release themselves. So this is very much a healing practice as well. And also simply by observing our mind and our thoughts and emotions, we can really intuitively come to an insight into the very nature of our mind. So this is very much a bridge into the wisdom of Vipassana practice. And then the third object that Alan Wallace recommends, resting in awareness. And so here, quoting Padmasambhava from the 8th century, great Indian master who brought Buddhism to Tibet, he describes this practice. He says, while steadily gazing into the space in front of you, so having the eyes open in this practice, without meditating on anything, steadily concentrate your consciousness without wavering, meaning we're not focusing on any object, we're turning awareness in upon itself and just knowing that we're aware. He says, having nothing on which to meditate and without any modification or adulteration, place your attention simply without wavering in its own natural state, its natural lucidity, its own character, just as it is. Remain in clarity and rest the mind so that it is loose and free. So all we're doing is turning awareness in upon itself and just simply knowing that we're aware. And there are huge advantages for this practice for us in the modern world. By just turning awareness in upon itself, much easier to let go of that obsessive compulsive thinking. By resting in awareness, we're really putting the mind into neutral gear. Now, our mind tends to be very tight and constricted. That is our default mode in daily life. And so some little stimulus comes, we easily react and get out of balance. A little bit like the water in this cup here. Our mind is like the water in the cup, tight and constricted. If we have a little pebble and we drop that into the water here, the surface is completely disturbed. Similarly, with our tight, constricted mind, a little stimulus comes, we're easily unbalanced. Whereas if we do this practice, resting in awareness, what we notice is that awareness is open, spacious, and still. And then through doing this practice, we can bring that state into daily life and have our default mode as open, spacious stillness. That would be like the water in a lake. You drop that same little pebble in that lake, hardly a ripple. If our mind is like that in daily life, some stimulus comes, we won't get unbalanced, we won't react. So this is going to be very helpful for us in daily life. And by turning awareness in upon itself and simply knowing that we're aware, this is very close or very much a bridge into Vipassana practice. We can really come to an insight, intuitive insight into the very nature of our own mind. So this awareness practice, shamatha practice, very much a bridge into Vipassana practice. But then also Tsongkhapa in his shamatha text, he also says in terms of objects, he says, alternatively, you achieve concentration by focusing on the body of the Tathagata. Tathagata means Buddha. So he's recommending using a mental image of a Buddha as the object to focus on. There are a lot of advantages with that. The Buddha, a mental image of a Buddha, a very virtuous object. And also by becoming familiar with that, that's very much a good preparation for Tantra practice, because in Tantra practice, higher Tantra practice, we're visualizing a lot of Buddhas and deities. And so if we've already done that in Shamatha, it's a lot easier later in Tantra. But many people find this extremely difficult to use as an object for Shamatha because it's a complex visualization, and many of us are not very good at visualizing. And then some meditation texts even say, oh, you find the breath too difficult? Okay, find yourself a stick or a pebble, put it down and simply look at it. So we could even use a visual object to begin the practice. But a visual object, a sense object, is quite coarse and it won't take us very far in the practice. And so if we do start with a visual object, then you'll find you can only make so much progress. Then you'll need to switch to a more subtle object such as the breath or the mind or awareness. So the general recommendation for objects is use the object that works best for you. So we can experiment with a number of different objects, see which one suits us. Once we find that, stick with that object and don't keep changing the object. Because here we also have another quote from Tsongkhapa who says, if you cultivate concentration by moving to many dissimilar objects of meditation, it will be a great impediment to achieving shamatha. So yes, as a beginner, experiment with a few different objects, see which works best for you, which resonates with you, find the one that works best with you, and stick with that object to move along these 9 stages to shamatha that we're going to look at tomorrow. So that's a little bit about objects. That brings us to the meditation now. We'll go to the first of the 3 variations of mindfulness of breathing that we're going to cover this weekend, and that is the full body breath practice. And that is that we simply focus on any sensations in the body associated with the in and out flow of the breath. So here we can move our attention around, simply noticing any sensations in the body connected with the in and out flow of the breath. And we're observing these tactile sensations directly using what's called bare attention. Again, be very careful that we're not controlling the breath, so just let that go, let the breathing do whatever it needs to do. And in this practice, we're building those roots of relaxation. So really the emphasis is on relaxation. And if particularly using the out breath, if you notice any tightness or tension in the body and the mind, then on each out breath, just release that tightness and tension in the body and the mind. And if you notice any thoughts coming up, getting pulled away, also releasing those on the out breath. So really emphasizing that relaxation, but there's balance. So we're not relaxing and allowing ourselves to sink into dullness. So maintaining whatever level of clarity we begin with. So as we deepen relaxation, not simply sinking into dullness, maintaining whatever clarity we began with. Emphasis on relaxation. That's the practice. Let's do that practice now. Find a nice, comfortable posture. Let's begin. We begin by preparing the body. In other words, establishing a good, comfortable posture. So keeping the back nice and straight. And at the same time, allow the entire body to become completely relaxed, completely at ease. softening and relaxing all the muscles in the face. And having established a good posture, keeping the body as still as possible, avoiding any unnecessary movement. Allowing the breathing to flow naturally and effortlessly. And preparing the mind, setting it into a state of ease and relaxation. Releasing all activities of the mind, and simply allowing the mind to come to rest in the present moment. Resting in that stillness of the present moment. And whilst maintaining a basis of a relaxed body and a relaxed mind, now bring your attention to the sensations of the breath throughout the body. Simply noticing any sensations in the body associated with the in and out flow of the breath. And maintaining an ongoing flow of mindfulness of the sensations of the breath throughout the entire cycle of each in and out breath. If you get distracted from the breath, the first thing to do is simply relax. Then release the distraction and very gently return to the breath. Relax, release, and return each time you become distracted. Simply keep coming back to the breath again and again, patiently and happily. Maintaining that emphasis on relaxation and using the out breath as an opportunity to relax and release any tightness or tension in the body or the mind. And if you find yourself falling into dullness or drowsiness, then use the in breath as an opportunity to arouse and refresh your focus, to sharpen your focus on the breath. We can bring the meditation to a close. Got some time for question answer now. Do we have any questions there, Gal?
Not yet. Not everyone is welcome to write their questions now, if they have any.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, I see there is a question.
Sure.
What do you mean by associated with the breathing? If I have a pain in the back, is it valid? A buzz in my leg, asks Shlomi.
Associated with the breathing means that as you're breathing in and out, you may notice, due to that process of breathing in and out, you may notice some sensations in the body. I mean, let's say the back. Let's say you have a slight pain in the back, but as you breathe in, it gets quite intense. So then you could focus on those sensations. So it's basically any sensations you notice as a result of your breathing in and breathing out. So you wouldn't be focusing on a pain in the knee or an itch on the head or something like that. So anything to do connected with the in and out flow of the breath. So you may notice some like expansion of the chest area. You may notice something around in the abdomen. You may notice something around the nostrils or in the throat area or across the shoulders or something when you're breathing out in and out through the chest and so forth. So anything that is somehow connected with the in and out when you're breathing in and breathing out. So we wouldn't be just focusing on aches and pains anywhere in the body. That's not this practice.
Thank you. Alan asks, can you change from closed eyes to half closed to open eyes through one meditation?
You could, depending on what's going on. I mean, for example, let's say you're meditating with the eyes open normally, but then on a particular occasion, maybe there's something in your visual field that is sort of really catching your attention. Particularly like if you're meditating in a group situation and someone in front of you is moving a lot and that's pulling your attention, then you can close your eyes. Or if you start by meditating with eyes closed, but you're finding you're getting a bit drowsy, then you could open them. But what I would recommend is to learn how to meditate with the eyes at least partially open and have that as your standard approach. Particularly we mentioned in this last session, Alan Wallace mentioned using the mind as the object and this resting in awareness. Those, particularly in those shamatha practices, it's very much recommended to have the eyes open, either naturally or partially. Again, to help reduce dullness, but also to help keep the mind into the present moment. Because with the eyes closed, much easier to drift off into the past and the future. With the eyes open, even though you're not really looking at anything, your visual gaze is a little bit engaged, and that only happens in the present moment. So you'll find that it helps to lock you into the present moment. And for example, with the shamatha practice, observing thoughts and so forth, we want to be able to do that in daily life, to be able to observe our thoughts, not get caught up in them. But if we've only ever meditated with eyes closed, observing thoughts, then we don't have a habit of observing them with eyes open, because normally in daily life we have our eyes open. However, if we meditate with eyes open, observing thoughts, we have that habit of observing with eyes open. So it's much easier to then do that in daily life. But also in a deeper sense is that, shamatha we've seen now is the basis of vipassana, particularly this vipassana practice of emptiness. And emptiness is really about realizing no subject-object duality. There's no independent me, independent objective world. Now, when we meditate with eyes closed, there can be a strong sense that there's a me in here and a world out there. So that sort of enhances or strengthens that sense of duality. Whereas with eyes open, there's not such a strong sense of inner and outer. And so that can help to break down that false sense of duality, which means then later in Vipassana practice, you may find it a little bit easier to come to realize emptiness, to realize non-duality. So there are a number of reasons to have the eyes open, but if there's a particular reason in a session to move from eyes open to closed, okay, but I certainly wouldn't be doing that sort of regularly as a normal thing.
Thanks. Chava is asking, I was given a mantra a while back when I studied TM. Can I use this mantra with the breathing?
What we're going to see in the next session when we focus on the abdomen, and that's really to help improve stability of attention, is that we can use some short-term strategies to help improve stability of attention. And one that we're going to introduce in the next session is counting the breath. Because if we're counting the breath, which is conceptual activity, that's occupying the mind, there's less like chance it'll get caught up in other distracting thoughts. So counting the breath can be helpful to help improve stability of attention. So I'm guessing that doing some sort of chanting some sort of mantra may have some similar effect, but that would only be really a short-term strategy to help improve stability of attention. It wouldn't be something as part of the standard practice, because we're adding something to the practice. And we will find that if we're like counting the breath, as we get deeper into the practice, what you will find is that counting the breath will start to just become another distraction, another obstacle. So you may find that things like chanting a mantra, if you're focusing on the breath and you're just getting swept away by your thoughts all the time, and you bring in a bit of chanting mantra and you find that helps to actually stay on the breath a little bit better, that would be okay to do a little bit at the beginning. But once you start to get better focused on the breath, you'd need to let go of chanting the mantra, because otherwise then the chanting the mantra will start to just become another distraction. So that's the recommendation. I'll talk more about the counting the breath in the next session.
Thank you. Iftach is asking, is it realistic for us as having Western lives to be able to reach the stage of focusing on thoughts or awareness?
Yes, that thoughts, because the thing is that not being able to focus on thoughts and emotions now causes us so much suffering. And if we develop that just a little bit, meaning we get a little bit more space from our thoughts, maybe we get caught up still a little bit, but maybe not as much, to the degree that we're able to step back and watch, to that degree, that would reduce our suffering. So even though maybe it's going to be difficult to completely be able to watch them and not get caught up ever, even if we do that a little bit, we're going to start to notice some big improvements in our life. And certainly the resting in awareness practice, what I find is that once people appreciate what that practice is, many people really resonate with that practice and find it extremely difficult, and find that this is very helpful in releasing that tight, constricted, reactionary mind, just to rest in that stillness. And also at a deeper level, then often people feel like that this practice is feel like coming home to who they really are, their inner nature. And so I find that of the two, observing thoughts and resting in awareness, what I find is that my own experience and talking to many people, once they appreciate what the resting in awareness practice is, they find that a little bit easier and bringing enormous benefits in daily life. But even, like I said, observing thoughts and emotions, even if we can do that a little bit, to that degree, we're not going to get so caught up and have less suffering in terms of getting overwhelmed by our thoughts and emotions. So there are enormous benefits to be had, even if we don't fully perfect that practice.
Inbar is asking, what shall I do when I try to watch my thoughts, but then no thoughts arise?
Watch that space. In that practice, the object is the space of the mind and whatever thoughts arise in that space. If no thoughts arise, just keep your attention there in that space, because something will pop up. But sometimes what happens in that practice as a beginner is we know our minds are chaotic, and so we bring a lot of tension in there. We feel like if I'm not really fully focused, really intensely focused, I'm just going to get swept away. So we apply a lot of tension to this observing. And then what that tension does is it suffocates our mind. There's no space for any thoughts to come up. So if you notice you've intense focus, just relax that, relax that, relax that, and they'll start to come up. But if there's nothing there, just watch that space and just be attentive to see what comes up there next. I think we've got time for at least one more question.
So Shlomi asks, why not experimenting with the breath? Hard, light, fast, slow, deep, shallow, etc. Why is it a problem if it helps me keep interested and deepen the samadhi? And pleasant sensations, and what's the significance of not manipulating it?
Well, but manipulating, see that this practice is about developing single-pointed concentration. And so we are attending to an object, and the object is the sensations of the breath. And so what you will find is that the breath, see, again, we are really focused outward. We're looking for happiness out there in terms of pleasurable experiences. And the breath, we go, oh, that's pretty boring, isn't it? So we want to juice it up. We want to make it exciting, And so we're trying to introduce a lot of things to make it exciting. But then we're still caught up in looking for something pleasurable. And then that craving is going to actually create a lot of obstacles to the practice. So rather than trying to you will actually find that the mindfulness of breathing is very interesting if you just pay close attention to the breath. If you appreciate the benefits of that practice, and then you'll be very enthusiastic to do it. And what you will find is that as you get deeper into the practice, as we saw in that earlier slide, initially we'll have a sense of calm and peace, but then really a sense of well-being pervading the body and mind, and then even a lot of blissful sensations in the body and a lot of joy in the mind. So you'll find that actually, if you're just patient and just look closely, keep looking, you're going to go through these stages of benefit. And you'll find that you won't need to somehow add things to make that practice more interesting or exciting, that actually that practice will take you through all of those stages naturally. And by trying to add these things, we're just really caught up with a lot of agitation and craving. And that's actually going to block us making any significant progress in this practice. So I would really recommend just to sort of let go of that altogether. In the next practice, in fact, at the beginning of the next session, we're going to do a variation of the full body practice where we in fact focus on the rhythm of the breath, noticing if our breathing is deep or shallow, slow or fast, long or short, just noticing what the breath is doing. And that can be very interesting in itself, just noticing the breath, and then noticing as the mind settles down, how does the breath, what happens to the breath? And so that can be very interesting in itself without having to try to do anything with the breath. So we'll do that practice next session, first practice. So that's it for the second session. We'll take a 30-minute break. In the last session, we'll do that practice, and then we'll look at what tools do we use in this practice of shamatha, what faults can arise, how do we overcome them. And then the second meditation in the next session, we're going to learn how to use the shavasana posture as a valid posture for meditation. So if possible, wherever you're watching this from, if you have a bed nearby or maybe a floor with some cushion on it or something, where you can actually go into the shavasana or corpse posture for the second meditation in the next session, that would be helpful. So if you can arrange it in that way, that would be good. If not, then that's okay. We'll learn the practice anyway. But let's take a 30-minute break now, come back and for the third session in 30 minutes.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.